Bring a Trailer podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Alex Porter here, director of auction production for the company, joined for the second time today by George Levy, automotive author, journalist, and also president of the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. George, welcome back.
Good to be here.
And George, you've brought a very exciting guest, somebody who barely needs an introduction, motorsport legend Skip Barber here to join us and talk a little bit about his career and his induction into the Hall of Fame. Skip, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Skip, you look like you're in a beautiful location there. Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm at Lime Rock Park in Connecticut. The commercial is, it's probably the most beautiful road course in the world.
It certainly looks it from my perspective. I've never been. We were planning on recording yesterday, a little bit of inside baseball, but it was too loud, too many race cars roaring around behind you. What's the event going on behind you today, Skip?
The only thing here today is a group from England who are trying to set lap records at multiple American tracks. They have an electric car that's got a huge fan in it. It's like the old Chaparral. You remember the sucker Chaparral?
Heck yes.
And they have broken the lap record at Laguna, at Goodwood, and they seem to be having mechanical problems here. They've been here a few days, and they're determined.
Is this little tiny car with a closed cockpit that I keep seeing all over the internet that's so fast in a straight line?
Yes.
Yeah, the McMurtry.
Yes,
that's right.
That's right.
Did they let you take a spin in it, Skip?
I haven't even seen it yet. It's down the way in a tent.
Well, we're going to, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge us, Skip, I'm sure the BAT community would love to go back in time a little bit before electric power. Although I guess Jim Hall was doing this a long time ago, right? So it's maybe there's nothing too new in the world. But I was hoping you could walk us a little bit through your career today. I know that you were basically racing as soon as you were interested in motorsports. But one thing I'm curious about, I read through a number of bios, and I don't know if love or interest in motorsports or love and interest of cars came first for you, or did they come at the same time?
Interest in cars. I was fortunate. I had a father that, like all good fathers, loved cars. And I started driving probably when I was 8. We lived in the city of Philadelphia with an alley-long driveway, common driveway, small road behind the house. And I was allowed to drive back and forth on that as long as I could find enough padding to be able to see out the windshield. So I must be the only guy in the world that went as many miles backwards as forwards. You couldn't turn around at either end. So it was obvious what happened.
Do you remember what kind of car that was, Skip?
It was an early 40s Ford.
Great. Fantastic. And then from what I understand, as soon as you were interested in motorsports, you were involved in motorsports. You were racing basically as soon as you were watching races. Is that correct?
That's correct, but it's probably was a big mistake. No, seriously, I, like so many people going racing, had no money. I was in college on a scholarship. My parents didn't have any money. And I decided to go racing. Maybe not a great idea. I remember when Al Holbert, whose father was a really good race car driver, Bob Holbert, when Al wanted to go racing, his father said, no, you have to get a good job and make enough money to do it. Of course, that job turned out to be at his father's dealership. But I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. So anytime I had a penny, I spent it on my very dilapidated race car. And, that's not the way to do it, unfortunately.
That's true. A lot of us end up in that boat, though. And a lot of us give up because of that, because it's so tough. But you obviously stuck with it. What were some of those early cars that were memorable to you that you were racing?
Memorable only to me, not to anybody else, was a Bugeye Sprite.
Man.
Which is the first car I raced. And I had a string of oddball, mostly English cars. Back then, mostly in the 60s and early 70s, there were a lot of people that sold race cars to make a living, generally imported cars from England. And so I usually got to drive something somebody else was trying to sell. And that almost, by definition, meant it wasn't very good. I mean, there was no demand, right? So you put somebody in the car that hopefully will make it look good. So I struggled for years racing, not a lot, and that's not a good plan for any race car driver. It takes you a couple of races really to get where you finished the previous year. And when you only do a few a year, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, hard to stay in practice when you're not driving enough. Eventually, some of those cars, though, that you were being given or being asked to drive turned into some pretty exciting stuff. You've driven everything from Lotus 23s and Brabhams and Elvas, Formula Fords, Formula Grand Prix cars. What, in your mind, once you started graduating into the bigger stuff, what sticks out today? Or what do you remember fondly, or maybe even not fondly today as you look back on this impressive career and the wide variety of cars you drove?
I'll give you the commercial. And I'll sound like everybody that's ever driven a race car. I was much better than any results ever showed. So, for example, the first professional race I did, which was at Motorsports in Canada, I beat Jim Clark in an identical car. You reminded me of that when you said Lotus 23. That's what that was. So what? I'm serious. I barely finished the year. I probably only did 6 or 7 races that year. And that's generally the way it was for me. Clark said to me, "Wow, I'll see you in England." I didn't even know where England was. I'm barely kidding, let alone be able to go there. And I had that kind of thing happen fairly often. And I never made it. I don't know if you remember who Carroll Smith was. He was kind of the guru of road racing cars back then. He said I was the fastest guy that didn't make it. And
that's a dubious compliment, Skip.
It's not a compliment, but it's reality. Anyhow.
Eventually, you did kind of move into bigger bore stuff. And, I was reading about Porsche RSRs. But the thing that struck me, I find some of those early Formula Fords to be so beautiful and so elegant. And I know you have a lot of seat time in those cars. We sell them occasionally on Bring a Trailer, and I've occasionally thought about buying one. Some of them are affordable, not all of them. But what do you remember about those cars?
Well, they were terrific. I don't want to say beginners cars, but they were really good race cars. They were wonderfully simple. They didn't cost much. They didn't cost much to maintain. And they attracted, both in Britain and in this country, really good young drivers. So it was fabulous racing. I ran a Formula Ford race that wasn't part of anything at Sebring one winter. And there were 6 guys in it that ended up in Formula One. That's only one from America, but that was really impressive.
That's amazing. Do you mind mentioning a few of those names? Who were those folks?
Rini Wiesel, Tim Schenken was there. What was the good British driver's first name, whose last name was Walker? He was the Formula 3 champion in England then.
I think it was David Walker.
Might have been. Yeah.
Amazing. And you mentioned, Skip, both that you were thinking about the importance of consistency, right? Building your skill and being able to do something over and over again to get better and better at it. And, the fact that being in close racing and doing it frequently is really how somebody would make it, so to speak. Even, if you're getting dubious compliments about that, when you were thinking about the importance of doing things regularly, of going on the circuit, of going to Europe, is that where some of the early ideas for putting together a school or a coaching program came to you?
No. I was looking mid-70s now. 1975 was the last year I raced. Bad story from my point of view. Let me go sideways for a minute. Do you remember March in the early and mid-70s? They were the biggest manufacturer of Grand Prix cars. They
Yep.
sold the most Formula One cars.
Yep.
And they wanted to really come to the U.S. And they saw their way in was to have the 5,000 car. And I was fortunate to get to ride, to drive that car. Should have been a good year. Auto Week then, which was the Bible of road racing, picked me to win the championship. The car was designed by a guy named Harvey Postlethwaite, who later went from March to Ferrari to be the chief designer on the Formula One cars. And he made a fascinating mistake. He took the Formula 2 car, the really small car, and put a Chevy in it. Great. But he used the design of the back of the Formula 3 car. And the 5,000 car had a bigger gearbox with different mounting points for the suspension. And this guy was brilliant. He somehow missed that. So all the rear suspension was anchored in the wrong place, if you will, in the car. And, I drove that car maybe 5 races and, when we sent it back to England, it killed my career. And
well, out of the ashes of the March disaster comes a different career, right? And maybe the thing that you're the most well remembered for now, Skip, because you certainly did make it in the end, and that's putting together a driving school, right?
Yeah, I was looking for something to do when I was done racing. I didn't think it would be that soon. And I wasn't really sure that you could teach people to drive a race car. Right. I mean, now that's obvious, right? And why not?
Yeah, thanks to you, Skip.
Well, whatever. But when you envision standing on a corner beside the road and guys flying by, that's a little different than standing behind somebody on the pitcher's mound, and talking to them between pitches, and being able to see the pitch. So I didn't know if that would work. And I was almost doing it. Remember, I thought I was still racing. I thought I was maybe coming up with something to do when I was done. And I discovered in 1 year that, most importantly, you could teach people how to drive a race car. You really could. And I loved the process of being in business. It wasn't any different from racing. You got to get there. You got to do your best. You got to do it better than everybody else. There were an awful lot of schools starting up at the same time. And I really backed into it.
Yeah.
That's not a business plan, but that's what happened.
Well, but I mean, there's some analogs to what we've done here at Bring a Trailer. It's pretty exciting to make something up and to be kind of at the leading edge of it and to try to do it better than other people and to really pour your heart and soul into it. So that makes a lot of sense to me. What were some of the early notable successes or failures? What felt good to begin with and what didn't feel so good?
Well, I think we got a pretty good reputation fast. And I remember sitting in the office. We'd only been in business a couple of months, and opening an envelope, and that was Johnny Rutherford's application, with his check, not, gee, can I come for nothing? A frequently asked question. It was so satisfying to see the progress people made in a few-day program. And we began to get really good people early. We got the son of everybody. I mean, we had, if you look at American drivers, we had Phil Hill's son and Dan Gurney's son and Mario Andretti's son, all at the same time, racing against each other once we began a school race series. And it was fabulously rewarding.
I can imagine. And what a legacy you've built. And that, of course, leads us to what we're talking about here today, which is your induction into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. How did you find out about that, Skip? How did that process happen? How did George hunt you down?
I'm sorry about this, George. I think George called me and told me first, but there's a couple of guys that work there or hang around there that kind of tipped me off. But thank you, George. It was a day that made me feel really good. I was not planning on it, expecting it, or anything else.
Well, Alex is, I think we've discussed before, in our system, we have 200 voters. Our staff doesn't vote. I don't vote. So the credit that I deserve in this process, Skip, is helping to count the votes. But our voters literally, and now you are eligible to be one of our voters, are people like Mario Andretti, Don Garlitz, Richard Petty, you name it. We are very fortunate to have such great participation from the community in voting and deciding on who gets in.
Thank you. And well, no, thank you if you had nothing to do with it. Two of the three guys you just mentioned sent their kids and grandkids.
Amazing. Well, we know you have a limited time, Skip, and I really appreciate you doing this. Anything else that you'd like to mention, either about your long, illustrious career or about the Hall of Fame before we let you go?
I think just that I felt really good when George called me. I mean, this is a real honor, and I appreciate it. I can't do it. I'd like to accept it for all the people that worked at the school, but that doesn't work. But thank you.
Well, invite them to be there.
They're too cheap.
Perfect. Well, it's an impressive body that you're joining, Skip, and I think everybody is thrilled to have you there. I bet I can speak on behalf of George to say that, because you certainly are one of the legends. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye, Skip. Awesome. What a treat that was, George. What a charmer.
Yeah, he's amazing, and he was being a little bit self-deprecating because he was a Harvard graduate. So
I read that, and I didn't want to bring it up. People are always a little touchy about Harvard and Yale, but I mean, obviously a very impressive person, and from that self-deprecating generation that I just love. I mean, what a humble, approachable person, and again, what a charmer.
Indeed.
Well, thank you for bringing him on. That was a real treat for me, just as it was to have Jim Hall on a few months ago, George. I really appreciate it. If you don't mind, I'd love to go through a little bit of background and history on the Hall of Fame and talk about your involvement there. And maybe we could talk specifically about Skip and the auction that we have live right now on Bring a Trailer, the charity experience. Maybe start with the history of the Hall of Fame first. We kind of got onto this at the end of our Jim Hall podcast, and you and I were talking about how I wish, we should be recording this, and I wish we could talk about your kind of other gig. Do I understand that you're one of the founders of it, George?
No, I'm not one of the founders. The two founders, well, there were a number, but the two guys who are most responsible for the Hall of Fame existing are two fellows from Michigan, where I spent most of my adult life. Larry Ciancio was the guy who started it. He was working in advertising and primarily with PPG. PPG was big in motorsports at the time.
A big sponsor, right? I feel like I saw PPG liveries on a lot of cars. Yeah.
And in IndyCar racing for quite a while was the PPG IndyCar World Series.
Right. That's right. Yep.
So Larry is the founder. He very quickly brought in an attorney and councilman named Ron Watson, who was my predecessor. And Ron was the first president of the Hall of Fame and really is the guy most responsible for growing it into what it is today.
Fantastic. Talk to me about how your involvement happened. I see you have, I didn't notice until just now, you've got your Hall of Fame shirt on. By the way, is there an acronym? What do you guys call it for short?
No, we don't. It's hard to make an acronym out of MSHFA,
Yeah, totally.
But my involvement came directly from Ron Watson. Again, he ran the place right up until, sadly, he passed away about 5 years ago. He had already asked me to succeed him, at the time, but it was a devastating loss. But probably 10-12 years ago, I met Ron. Maybe I went to one of the events, and he had that, wonderful Tom Sawyer quality of, boy, painting this fence sure is fun. And if you want to paint with us, I would let you do it. But man, it's really, really a lot of fun. And he just had a wonderful personality, wonderful leadership qualities, very, bright guy, incredible integrity, and all those things appealed to me. I started as a volunteer and gradually worked my way to my current position.
Fantastic. You kind of hinted at it a little bit when Skip was still on the line, but talk a little bit about how you decide who becomes an inductee and how that all works.
Yeah, so we are the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. We honor all forms of motorsports. So, in addition to having induction every year and bringing new Hall of Famers into the Hall of Fame, we have a museum in Daytona Beach, Florida. And basically, when people are nominated, they get put on there's a large group of nominees at any given time. It's 300 or 400 people, and then we have a voting process where it's 2 rounds. The first round is to narrow it down from an unlimited number of people in any category, and there are 8 or 10 different categories. There's an open wheel category, there's a motorcycle racing category, there's a boat racing category, a stock car racing, and so on. That first round of voting narrows it to 6 finalists. The 6 highest vote getters from that first round then go on the final ballot. Second round of voting happens to decide, of those 6 who popped up or emerged from the first round, which one is going to be the one that gets in the Hall of Fame. So in the case of Skip, for example, who was just with us, he got more votes than the other 5 finalists. And we don't reveal vote counts because it's just heartbreaking, because and we know that some years in some categories it's literally decided by 1 vote or 2 votes.
Sure. And you mentioned it's the folks who are in the Hall of Fame themselves who are doing the voting, right? So
So I should clarify that about 50% of those 200 voters are people that are Hall of Famers. And it's funny, every year it's almost as if we do paper ballots, we mail them out, they get mailed back. And every year the first ballot back is either Don Garlits, Big Daddy Don Garlits,
I love that you mentioned Doug Garlitz is in there. That's fantastic.
or Mario Andretti. It's almost like those 2 guys are still racing and want to be the one to get the first ballot in, and a bunch of other people, Chip Ganassi, Rusty Wallace, you name it, throughout the sport, throughout the different categories, Hurley Haywood, Danny Sullivan, top motorcycle racers. Anyhow, so about half of them are inductees. The other half are historians, authors, again, independent voices of expertise in the different categories.
Can you talk a little bit about the museum and how the general public can interact with the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate in that we have a beautiful museum on the grounds of Daytona International Speedway. We are a separate entity, but they are our landlords, and we are incredibly grateful to be at the World Center of Racing, and which also makes a lot of sense given we honor all different forms of motorsports. And Daytona is one of the few tracks where you have motorcycle racing, you have car racing, and many types of car racing. And within close proximity, there's major drag racing and air racing and boat racing and stuff.
Mhm.
So it's a great fit for us. We have a beautiful museum in which all these forms of motorsports and all our inductees are on display, and we're open almost 365 days a year. Christmas, Thanksgiving are exceptions, but basically, Monday to Sunday, every week under normal scheduling, we are open and from 9 to 5, and eager to have folks come visit us.
Fantastic. How often do you get down to the museum, George?
Well, our offices adjoin the museum, so I'm there most days.
Oh, you're there all the time. You can find
Yeah,
George
yeah,
there. All right, great. We'll hand out your personal email and let people set. No, I'm kidding.
perfect. Give them my cell phone number. Why not?
Sure, why not? We'll post it along with the pod link. You mentioned air racing. Do you have? I'm a kind of an airplane nut. Do you have aviation categories in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, we have aviation category, powerboat category. There are a lot of great aviators. Art Chester was the most recent inductee. A lot of the names you would expect are already in. It's funny when you run a Hall of Fame. There are certain times you go, gee, there's certain people you sort of expected would already be in. And in aviation, there's a pioneering aviator named Lincoln Beechey, who was, if you read about him, was just amazing. The Wright brothers thought he was the greatest thing that ever happened to aviation, and he hasn't been voted in yet. But a lot of the great names in air racing are already in our Hall of Fame.
Fantastic. So talk a little bit about, this is what we were discussing last time when we had Jim Hall on, and we're talking about your wonderful book again, that I'll plug again because it was so good. I've been leafing through it since last time we spoke, George. We've got a copy here at the office. Thank you for that. And it's a hit with our staff. We were talking a little bit about the Hall of Fame's involvement with Bring a Trailer, which, you guys have been running charity auctions on our site. And we have one live right now in association with Skip's induction into the Hall of Fame. But maybe talk a little bit about how, running charity auctions on BAT came about in the first place. And then we can dive into specifically into the one that we've got live right now.
I think, first of all, as a 501c3, a nonprofit, you're constantly looking for ways to bring income into the Hall of Fame. And I think someone had become aware of the auction you guys did with Jim Farley, of Ford. And when that came up, Mark Royce, the president of General Motors, was at one of our events for Zora Duntov was being inducted. And we thought, gee, wouldn't it be cool if Mark was going to be kind enough and generous enough and would have the time, to offer a similar thing to what you guys had done so successfully with Jim. Mark's great, and he jumped right in, and that was our first auction. That was earlier this year. It worked out great. It raised a substantial amount of money, but also ended up a fantastic experience. The winner of the auction had a terrific time. And then the next one was an experience of behind the scenes at Penske Racing. And again,
I was real jealous of that one, George.
Well, you're going to be even more jealous because, we want to always over deliver if we can. And so, in our listing, we never want somebody to be bidding on an auction and going, oh, you know what? That didn't seem quite as special as it did, because we're the thing that seemed to work, and you know this better than we do, is that if these are one of a kind experiences you can't buy, you can't just go out and pay a ticket somewhere. Those are the things that people really get excited about. And so the people at Penske have been so great. And the winners, he gets to bring 5 of his friends, and they're going to spend hours at the facility, and they're going to see all the race shops, the IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR. And we promised, I think, meet and greets with 2 of the drivers. That it looks now like it's going to be 3 or 4, and it could just be a fabulous. I'm envious of the winner of that auction.
That's really, really fantastic, George. So this podcast will go live tomorrow, and the auction for the Skip Barber experience is live right now. It just went up a day or two ago. And we will pair this podcast with that.
Sure.
So folks will be able to check that out when they listen to this, but give us the primer on it. Tell us a little bit about what we're offering this time around.
So this is, again, one of those unique experiences that, you just can't replicate. So Skip, obviously one of the great legends of American motorsports. He's being inducted in March. We thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we could put together something that would honor Skip and give people a special experience? The Skip Barber Racing School, Skip no longer owns the school, but he's still quite friendly with them, and it still carries his name. The people at the Skip Barber Racing School, which is going great guns, by the way, have offered a 3-day racing school at any of their tracks and any of their cars. This is an incredible experience just by itself. It's worth, depending on the track you choose and so on, is worth up to like $12,500 just by itself. But in addition, the winners of this auction will get to be part of Skip's entourage, basically, at his induction. Our induction ceremony is next March 10th and 11th here in Daytona Beach at the Hilton oceanfront. And the winners will get to be at Skip's table during the induction ceremony. There's going to be a private reception just for Skip and some of his former students. He was alluding to some of the people that...
Yeah, I didn't want to put him on the spot, but maybe, George, you could list off he was very humble about, children of famous racers going to his school. But in the early days, quite a few famous racers themselves were also graduates.
Yeah, and there were. I know when we were announcing the class of 2025 at the Long Beach Grand Prix, Skip and Mario Andretti joined us for that announcement. Mario on behalf of Carl Haas, who we used to drive for. And Mario and Skip were talking beforehand, and Mario was talking about just the number of Andrettis who have gone through that he steered to Skip's school. So, a bunch of Andrettis. I know Unsers have been through the school, and really, you go through almost any racing family. And I went through the Barber school. I'm a Skip Barber graduate, but I'm not a Michael Andretti, sadly.
Yeah, well, we can all have ambitions. Most of us most folks who are graduates aren't Andretti's. In fact, I would say no one is. But
Indeed.
presume some of those folks will be invited and could quite possibly be in attendance, right?
Yeah. So
Surely Skip is a beloved figure amongst a tremendous number of racers.
yeah, every year our induction ceremony is a pretty wonderful event because, in addition to the 9 new inductees, and we're going to have people like Skip and Dale Jarrett is being inducted in March in the same class. Tony Schumacher, the Sarge, who is the all-time winningest Top Fuel driver, and on and on. In addition to the inductees and their presenters, who are usually our pretty high-profile people, we get 20, 25 returning
Oh,
inductees. So anybody who comes to our induction is going to be surrounded. Even people in the business are kind of like, "Oh my God, I can't believe all these people are in the same room." And that's Hurley Haywood over there, and that's Chip Ganassi over there, and that's Roger Penske over there, or whoever the people are in a given year. So a number of his former students who are Hall of Famers are going to be part of this private get together with Skip and the winners of this auction. So it's an absolutely irreplaceable kind of insider experience.
it's sounds like it's going to be an amazing time. And I will say from my perspective, but I think from a lot of my colleagues too, we love running these charity auctions. We love, we donate all our fees to all these things, right? We wouldn't promote a cause unless we believe in it, right? We try to be pretty authentic about that stuff. And so these are always really exciting for us, exciting for our staffers even to work on them. And it's fun to even play the little bitty tiny part I get to play in it. So, thanks for bringing us the experiences, George. We love having them on the site. What's coming up next? What do we got? What do we got next? I'm ready for the next thing.
We've got a few very special ones that we're not ready to announce, but I can I can tell you off of the podcast. But some amazing experiences coming up. And let me also say that this has been such a great shot in the arm for the Hall of Fame. We're so grateful to bring a trailer. And it's not just the revenue it brings in. Obviously, when it comes to an auction, that's a primary thing.
Sure.
But just the buzz and the conversation. I mean, and that's one of the beauties of Bring a Trailer is, even if you're not interested in buying a particular car, you want to read the thread, the communication, and all these people chiming in on their thoughts about it. And so that's been a really rewarding part of this process as well.
It's always my favorite thing is hearing people, chat about, reminisce about folks. I think there's going to be, I would imagine a large number of our community are also graduates of Skip Barber's racing school. And I'm sure there's going to be some fun stories that folks are going to share. What about you, George? You've always got interesting stuff cooking. Anything you want to share with our listeners and with our community? What do you got going on?
I'm still doing book signings and appearances related to the Jim Hall book. The reception to that has been just overwhelmingly kind, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm going to be doing a book signing at M1 Concourse up in Michigan. I don't know if you've been there. It's
I've
fabulous.
not been, but I know of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, their American Speed Festival, which is a wonderful event that is in early October on Sunday, October 6th. I'm going to be doing a book signing at the American Speed Festival. And then a couple weeks later at the Simeon Museum in Philadelphia, there's going to be on October 19th. I hope I have that date right. Saturday in the late morning, we're going to have a panel discussion about Jim Hall, Chaparral, the book, and all of the above.
Oh man, that's on the very short list of places I would like to visit. There's some pretty iconic cars in that facility.
I'm a little embarrassed to say this. I've never been, so
Oh, really?
I'm as excited about going there just to look around and appreciate some, the hippie 917 and
Totally. They've got a tank Bugatti, I think. They've got a DBR1S, some really impressive cars. And they used to fire. We have a shout out Cecily, one of our staffers, is a longtime volunteer there. And I know they used to fire up the cars, and Dr. Simeon would drive them around. And since his passing, rest in peace, I don't know if they still do that. I hope they do, because I know that was always very exciting for folks to get to see these cars fire up and drive around the parking lot.
I believe they still do that, but I'm really looking forward to going there and checking it out for myself. And by the way, as someone in your position, I think it's important for you to come monitor the charitable organizations you get involved with. So I think you should come to our induction in March when Skip and Tony and Dale and all the rest are being inducted.
Yeah, maybe just to monitor. That's the most important thing, is just to keep an eye on you guys. Make sure you're as above board as you claim you are. Well, that's extremely kind, George. I really appreciate that. And be careful. I may take you up on that.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. And hopefully, you were very mysterious and you got me excited about what's coming up. So next time we get another great experience up, maybe we can do another one of these. Any parting shots? Anything else you'd like to share before we end here, George?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I really, really appreciate it, and we're just so focused on our upcoming induction of all these folks, like we are every year. And if people want to come visit us again, we're open almost every day of the year, right at Daytona International Speedway, the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America Museum.
Well, wonderful, George. Thanks for joining again. Thanks for bringing Skip. You're always welcome back as long as you keep bringing all these legends of motorsports. I don't know if folks are so interested in hearing from you and me, but as long as it's Jim Hall and Skip Barber, I think folks will take that every week.
Exactly. No, and those guys are so good. And to your point, like when we announced the class of 2025, we did that at the Long Beach Grand Prix. We were in the media center. And sure, I can go there and read off the names or list the names, and there might be a certain crowd. But when you have Mario Andretti on one shoulder and Skip Barber on the other shoulder, there's a lot more.
Yeah,
Attention, a
totally.
lot more media, a lot more excitement.
Totally. Well, thanks again, George. And thanks to all of you for listening. As always, we love to hear comments, criticisms, feedback, ideas, anything you got. Please send them to podcast@bringatrailer.com. Thanks to George. Thanks to Skip Barber. And we will catch you next time.